A YouTuber beat Star Wars. Obsession was made for $750,000, and it has grossed more than $400 million worldwide, passing the lifetime total of a Star Wars movie that cost $165 million just to shoot. By early July, it stood at $403 million, with $245 million of that from the United States and Canada, and $157 million from overseas. And it kept climbing. The Mandalorian and Grogu was the first new Star Wars film in theaters in 7 years, and it opened to $81.7 million in North America. Then it stopped. Its second weekend fell 69%, and it has since settled around $342 million worldwide, more than $60 million short of Solo, A Star Wars Story, the franchise's previous low at $393 million. It's on track to finish as the lowest-grossing live-action Star Wars film ever made. The director is Curry Barker, a 26-year-old sketch creator, half of the YouTube and TikTok duo That's a Bad Idea, which has more than 1 million followers, and this is his first feature. He premiered it at the Toronto International Film Festival in September of 2025, where Focus Features bought it for around $14 million, roughly 20 times what the movie cost to make. It opened in American theaters on the 15th of May, 2026. Here's the wild part. Its second weekend took $26.4 million, up 10% from its opening, and according to The Hollywood Reporter, it became the first film outside the Christmas corridor since E.T. in 1982 to grow its earnings in both its second and its third weekends. The budget gap between the two movies is 220 to 1. It's also the highest-grossing festival acquisition of all time. Obsession is now the highest-grossing horror film of 2026 and the highest-grossing movie ever made for under $1 million, before anyone adjusts for inflation. Art. The Clown crushed Kraven. Terrifier 3 was made for around $2 million and finished with more than $76 million worldwide, while Sony's Kraven the Hunter cost $110 million and never reached $62. Kraven took $24.8 million in North America and $34.9 million everywhere else, for about $59 million total, though some accounts put it a little over $62. Sony's budget started at $90 million and climbed to $110 after pandemic and strike delays, and some reporting puts it as high as $130. That made it the most expensive Marvel film Sony had ever produced. It also flopped. Terrifier 3 was financed completely outside the studio system, released unrated by Cineverse, and directed by Damien Leone, who builds the film's effects himself. Unrated releases normally cap how many screens a movie can play on. It opened to $18.3 million anyway, and took the #1 spot in North America that weekend, knocking Joker Folie à Deux out of first place in its second weekend. The previous film in the series, Terrifier 2, cost about $250,000. Terrifier 3's entire production budget was under 2% of Kraven's, and it out-earned it by roughly $17 million. Sony's most expensive Marvel film became the only one in the series to finish under $100 million, and the movie that beat it is the highest-grossing unrated film ever released. Film students buried Will Smith. The Blair Witch Project was shot over 6 days and nights in Maryland for somewhere between $35,000 and $60,000, and it finished 1999 with more money worldwide than Wild Wild West, which cost $170 million. Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez directed it with 3 actors, handheld cameras, and no completed screenplay. It grossed $248.6 million, about $140 million in the United States and $108 million overseas. Wild Wild West managed $113.8 million domestically and $108.3 million overseas for $222.1 million. And it had every advantage. Will Smith was coming off Independence Day and Men in Black. Warner Brothers gave it the 4th of July weekend, and the production ran 2 weeks over schedule and took 10 days of reshoots after poor test screenings, pushing the reported cost to $180 million. It holds a 17% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes from 131 critics. Blair Witch's shooting budget was roughly 1/3000th of that. The campaign is the part people still study. Artisans sold the footage as recovered evidence, built a missing persons website for the 3 filmmakers, and plenty of viewers took it at face value. The rollout matched the trick. It opened on the 19th of July on 27 screens and averaged $56,002 per screen, then widened to 1,101 theaters on the 30th and doubled that count a week later. Artisan bought the entire finished movie overnight at Sundance for $1.1 million and made that money back in the first weekend it played on 27 screens. Carpenter outsold Michael Jackson. Halloween was made for $325,000 and grossed $47 million in America and $70 million worldwide. while The Wiz, a Universal musical with Diana Ross and Michael Jackson in it, cost more than $20 million and took about $21 million domestically. Both came out in 1978, months apart. John Carpenter's film went out through Compass International on the 25th of October, and at the time it was the most successful independent film Hollywood had ever seen. It returned roughly 215 times what it cost. The Wiz was the opposite bet in every way. Universal and Motown produced it. Sidney Lumet directed, Diana Ross played Dorothy, Michael Jackson played the Scarecrow, and everyone involved expected a major hit. Some sources put the budget at $24 million and some at $22, with the domestic take landing around $21. Nobody made money. What Halloween proved is why the slasher template exists at all, because the margin was so extreme that every distributor in the country went looking for the next one. The Wiz's failure is credited with ending the big-budget Hollywood musical and pushing every studio in town towards smaller bets, which is exactly the business Halloween had just proved worked. Jigsaw humiliated Halle Berry. Saw cost $1.2 million and grossed $103.8 million worldwide, while Catwoman, with a $100 million budget behind it, finished at $82.4 million. James Wan directed Saw on a compressed schedule, and it opened on the 29th of October 2004, taking $55.9 million in North America and $47.9 million abroad. That worldwide total is 86.6 times its budget. Warner Brothers had an Oscar winner and a comic book property, and still lost money at the box office alone. Lionsgate had a first-time feature director. Catwoman never got a sequel, and Saw got 9 of them. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I make videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would really help. Thanks. Peele out-earned King Arthur. Get Out cost $4.5 million and made $255.5 million, while King Arthur Legend of the Sword cost $175 million and made $148.7 million. Jordan Peele's first film went out through Universal on the 24th of February 2017, produced with Blumhouse, and took $176 million in the United States and Canada, plus $79.4 million everywhere else. Deadline put its net profit at $124.8 million, which made it the 10th most profitable release of the year and the best return on investment of 2017, at roughly 630%. King Arthur went backward. It took $39.2 million domestically and $109.5 million internationally, and Warner Brothers and Village Roadshow lost more than $150 million on it. It had been planned as the first installment of a 6-film series. The deficit on one film and the profit on the other were roughly the same size, pointed in opposite directions. The $175 million franchise starter never got a second film, and the $4.5 million debut it lost to won the Academy Award for Original Screenplay. Jason outran Heaven's Gate. Friday the 13th was made for an estimated $550,000, with some accounts saying $650,000, and it grossed $59.8 million globally. Heaven's Gate came out the same year, cost $44 million, and took $3.5 million. Sean S. Cunningham's film went out through Paramount on the 9th of May 1980, and finished as the 15th highest grossing release of the year and the studio's second biggest. Michael Cimino's Western opened that November, and United Artists pulled it from theaters almost immediately, then re-released a shortened cut in April of 1981. It never recovered. The losses effectively ended United Artists as an independent studio. A summer camp slasher shot for the price of a house outgrossed the movie that killed a studio by roughly 17-1. Shyamalan erased Assassin's Creed. Split cost $9 million and grossed $278.5 million worldwide, while Assassin's Creed, playing in the same theaters that same winter, cost $125 million and finished at $240.5 million. Fox released the game adaptation on the 21st of December 2016, with Michael Fassbender starring, adapted from Ubisoft's series. Universal put out Split on the 20th of January, produced with Blumhouse, directed by M. Night Shyamalan, with James McAvoy carrying most of the film. For a few weeks that January, both were in wide release at the same time. One was a global gaming brand with an Oscar-nominated lead and a 9-figure budget, and the other was a contained thriller with essentially one location. The math was brutal. Split's budget came to about 7% of Assassin's Creed's, and it out-earned it by nearly $40 million. Fox's film is reported to have lost money once marketing and distribution were counted, and the planned sequels never happened. Assassin's Creed was supposed to be the film that finally made video game adaptations work, and it was outgrossed by a movie shot almost entirely inside one basement set. Nicolas Cage outlasted Borderlands. Longlegs was produced for under $10 million and grossed roughly $128 million worldwide, while Borderlands, released a month later, cost well over $100 million and made a fraction of that. Osgood Perkins directed it. Neon released it in July of 2024, and it opened to $22 million, a company record. Lionsgate put out Borderlands that August, with Eli Roth directing and Cate Blanchett starring. Its worldwide gross is reported at about $33 million, and in later accounts around $46, against a budget reported north of $110 million, and, in those same later accounts, closer to $145. The ranges barely matter. One film had no franchise, no game license, and no marquee ensemble, and it returned more than 12 times its cost. The other had all three. Longlegs finished the year as the highest-grossing independent release of 2024. A Grin outdrew Disney. Smile cost $17 million and made more than $217 million worldwide. In the same season, Disney's Strange World cost $180 million to produce and took $73.6. Parker Finn's film was originally developed for Paramount Plus and only moved to a theatrical release after test screenings. It opened on the 30th of September 2022 to $22 million and topped the domestic box office. Strange World opened over Thanksgiving to $18.6 million across the holiday frame. It went nowhere. Disney Animation had a century of brand equity, the biggest family movie-going weekend of the year, and roughly $90 million in marketing, on top of that $180 million production budget, which is why you'll also see its total cost quoted at $317.4 million. Smile's production budget was under 10% of Strange World's. Paramount's movie had a first-time feature director and a plan to send it straight to a streaming service. Disney's reported loss on Strange World came to about $197 million, the biggest box office loss of the year, on a film playing across the hall from the cheapest hit of the season. Wan Flattened Conan. Insidious was produced for $1.5 million and grossed about $100 million worldwide, while Conan the Barbarian cost $90 million that same year and finished at $63.3. James Wan directed and Lee Whannell wrote it, and Film District released it on the 1st of April 2011. Conan opened that August with Jason Momoa starring, taking $21.2 million in North America and $42 million internationally, and the planned sequels were abandoned. Insidious cost less than 2% of what Conan cost, and out-earned it by nearly $40 million. Same two guys. This is the director and writer who made Saw for $1.2 million, doing it again 7 years later with a haunted house film. Wan and Whannell have now beaten a 9-figure studio film twice, with 2 different franchises, on a combined budget of under $3 million. Amityville Eclipsed, The Black Hole. The Amityville horror cost $4.7 million and took $86.4 million, while the most expensive film Disney had ever made cost $20 million and took $35. American International Pictures released it on the 27th of July, 1979, with Stuart Rosenberg directing and James Brolin and Margot Kidder starring, and it finished as the second highest-grossing film of the year in the United States and Canada, behind Kramer vs. Kramer at $106.26 million. Disney put out The Black Hole that December, chasing the science fiction audience Star Wars had just created, for a $20 million production budget, plus roughly $6 million more in advertising. That made it the most expensive picture Disney had ever produced. It grossed $35 million in the United States. That was it. Amityville cost about a quarter of what The Black Hole cost, and took roughly 2.5 times as much. The film was based on a best-selling book about a house on Long Island, and the account behind it has been contested for decades. The Black Hole opened to the biggest weekend Disney had ever recorded, $4.7 million, and still finished the year behind a movie that cost about what that single weekend earned. Zombies killed the movie musical. Night of the Living Dead was made for $114,000 and grossed about $30 million. 3 times what 20th Century Fox's $14 million Julie Andrews musical managed the same year. George A. Romero shot it outside Pittsburgh with a group of commercial filmmakers operating as Image 10, and it opened on the 1st of October 1968. The return was more than 260 times what the movie cost. Star had a budget of $14.32 million and took roughly $4 million domestically and $10 million worldwide. Robert Wise directed it, and 3 years earlier, Wise had made The Sound of Music, the biggest hit Fox had ever had. Star was built as the follow-up. The audience stayed home. It landed in the same 12 months as a black-and-white zombie picture shot by people who normally made beer commercials, and the zombie picture made 3 times as much on less than 1% of the budget. Its failure is credited with helping end the era of the big-budget roadshow musical. Fox's own studio head, Richard Zanuck, later called Star the company's Edsel, after the car line Ford spent years apologizing for. 2 divers sank Bennifer. Open Water was shot on consumer video cameras for somewhere between $120,000 and $130,000 of the filmmaker's own money, and it grossed $55.5 million worldwide, 7 times what Gigli made on a $75.6 million budget. Chris Kentis directed and Laura Lau produced, shooting over weekends and vacations with a 2-person cast and real sharks, and about $30 million of that total came from North America. Gigli arrived a year earlier with 2 of the most photographed people on the planet at the peak of their tabloid fame, and one of the largest marketing pushes of 2003. It grossed $7.7 million. That's it. Gigli's second weekend fell by 81.9%, the steepest collapse any wide release had recorded up to that point. A bedroom camera toppled Watchmen. Paranormal Activity was shot in Oren Peli's own San Diego house for $15,000 over about a week, and it grossed $193 million, more than Watchmen, which cost $130 million just to produce. Peli had no filmmaking background. He taught himself the equipment and made the movie anyway, and it took nearly $108 million in the United States, plus about $85 million internationally. Paramount bought it, financed a new ending, reported to have cost about $200,000 on top of the original shoot, gave it a limited American release on the 25th of September 2009, then went nationwide on the 16th of October. The rollout was its own experiment, because Paramount let viewers vote online to bring the film to their city. Watchmen opened on the 6th of March that year to $55.7 million and took the #1 spot, with a source text everyone had called unfilmable. It finished at $185.26 million worldwide. The horror film beat it. Watchmen's production budget was more than 8,000 times what Paranormal Activity's original shoot cost. 2 budget figures get quoted for that movie, and both are correct because they measure different things. $15,000 is what the original production cost. $450,000 is the all-in figure Guinness World Records uses, counting Paramount's reshoots and finishing costs, and Guinness measures net return including home video, which is why its entry cites $89.7 million rather than the theatrical gross. Guinness World Records still lists Paranormal Activity as the highest return on investment any film has ever produced, at 19,850%. If this was worth your time, consider subscribing so you catch every upload. Thanks for watching.